afternoon, just as I was locking the door to my fifth-floor apartment, my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Celia, who lived across the hall, blocked the elevator and whispered in a chilling voice, "Helen, do you know who's been going into your apartment every Thursday afternoon?" I froze. "I'm sorry. What?" She only smiled, a kind of smile that tells you something isn't right. I laughed awkwardly, thinking she must have been mistaken or imagining things. But a few hours later, when I came home, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A bottle of women's perfume, one I didn't recognize, sat neatly on my bedroom vanity. I hadn't bought it. Greg, my husband, certainly didn't use perfume, and no one else had a key to this place. Unless I was wrong. That week, I ordered a small hidden camera and discreetly installed it in the living room. And the very next Thursday, the footage changed everything I thought I knew about my life. A young woman walked into my apartment, calmly, fearlessly. She went straight into my bedroom as if she lived there. My name is Helen Thompson. I'm 53 years old. I've been married for 23 years. My son's grown now with a family of his own. I'm not the kind of woman people admire for being brilliant or ambitious. I work part-time, spending most of my days keeping the house in order, taking care of my husband and son, a simple life in a quiet neighborhood. People think I'm gentle, obedient, forgetful, and easy to manipulate. They might be wrong. I'm not young anymore, but I'm not weak. If you've ever felt uneasy in your own home, if you've ever doubted someone close to you, then blamed yourself for being too suspicious. Subscribe to the channel. We're here to face the truth together and learn how to stay steady through the hidden storms called family. Part 2. I must have watched that footage over 10 times. Each time, my heart beat faster. That woman, it was Rachel, my daughter-in-law. She entered the apartment with a key, entirely at ease like she belonged there. She went straight into the bedroom, opened the vanity drawer, and placed a thin envelope inside. She didn't take anything and caused no damage, just placed it there, and sprayed a little perfume into the air, like she was marking her territory. Then she left, quietly, the same way she came. I thought I'd be furious, but I wasn't. What I felt was confusion, deep, suffocating confusion. Why Rachel? She was married to my son. They lived across town. Why sneak into her mother-in-law's apartment every Thursday? That night, I asked Greg, "Did you give Rachel a copy of our keys?" Greg looked up from his phone, slightly frowning. "Huh? No. Why do you ask?" I shook my head. "Just curious." I knew he was lying. Greg was never good at hiding things, at least not from me, and the seed of suspicion began to take root. I checked my old messages with Rachel. 2 months earlier, she'd texted me, "Thanks for trusting me with the keys, Mom. It's easier to stop by and pick up Andrew's things every Wednesday now." Wednesday. But the footage showed her entering on Thursday. A coincidence or a calculated misdirection. I no longer knew whom to trust. I decided to install another camera, smaller, better hidden, tucked behind a row of books in the bedroom. This time, I scheduled it to record for the entire week. I didn't want to be a witness anymore. I wanted evidence. Meanwhile, I began watching Rachel more closely. I scrolled through old photos, family gatherings, dinners, those subtle touches between her and Greg I'd never noticed before. In one picture taken in our backyard, I remember Andrew had gone inside to get water. Rachel and Greg were standing side by side, smiling, too close, too comfortable. Maybe I hadn't looked carefully before. Or maybe I just hadn't wanted to see it. Next Thursday, I won't go to work. I pretended to have an appointment, but in truth, I stayed in the building, watching the live feed on my phone. At 1:08 p.m., Rachel entered. At 1:17 p.m., she left. When I returned home and opened the drawer, a new envelope sat in the exact same spot. I put on gloves, opened it, and inside was an old photograph, Greg and Rachel, his hand resting on her shoulder. On the back, in neat handwriting, were the words, "Some things never change." I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, the photo trembling in my hand. I remembered every detail from that party. the laughter, the clinking glasses. Rachel had only been Andrew's girlfriend back then, and Greg had acted friendly, almost protective. I used to feel warm inside, thinking he treated her like a daughter. Now I realized it was the kind of affection that should never have existed. That night, Greg came home late. He said he'd had a meeting at work. His eyes avoided mine, his breathing was heavy, and there was a trace of women's perfume on his shirt, the same scent as the unfamiliar bottle sitting on my vanity. I gave a faint smile and cleared the dinner table as if nothing was wrong. I once believed that silence could protect a marriage, but silence only helps a liar sleep better. The next morning after Greg left for work, I opened his laptop. I'm not the kind of person who invades privacy, but I knew if I didn't look, I'd stay blind forever. His inbox was full of work emails. I scrolled quickly, my pulse racing, until I saw one unsent message in the drafts folder. No subject, no recipient. I opened it. Just a few short lines, but enough to make my world collapse. "Rachel, we need to be more careful. Helen's starting to suspect something. Let's stop for a while. I'll find a way to explain." No excuses, no misunderstanding, just the raw, ugly truth. I stared at the screen as the ticking wall clock echoed in sync with the sound of my heart breaking. 23 years of marriage, shattered in a single click. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. Instead, I opened the voice recorder app. I read the contents of the email aloud, saved it in my own voice, then copied the message onto an external drive. I was no longer the trusting wife. I had become the evidence collector. That evening, when Greg came home, I sat at the dinner table as usual. He made small talk about work, about a company party. I nodded, smiled faintly, and asked softly, "Do you ever feel like we're living in a house full of secrets?" He chuckled. "You've been reading too many crime novels." I smiled back. "Maybe. But in those stories, the truth always comes out in the end. People just aren't always ready to see it." Later that night, I sat alone in the dark living room. On the table were two items: the USB drive with the copied email and the small camera with its light finally turned off. I knew that if I stayed quiet, they'd keep playing their parts. But I was done being the audience. I had started writing a new script, one where I was no longer the victim. 2 days later, I brought an apple pie and knocked on the door across the hall. Mrs. Celia opened it, sharp-eyed behind her round glasses. "Something's wrong, dear?" she asked, as if she already knew. I nodded slightly. "I just need a conversation without pity." She let me in. Her apartment smelled of old wood, jasmine tea, and a kind of silence you could trust. I told her everything, no embellishment, no hesitation, about Rachel, about Greg, about the unsent email. She didn't interrupt, didn't gasp, didn't say, "Oh my God," or "That can't be true." She simply poured more tea and nodded quietly, as if she'd once walked that same road. After a while, she finally spoke. "When I was young, my husband used to disappear every Tuesday night, said he was playing cards with friends." I looked at her. "Not cards, was it?" She smiled, a smile neither bitter nor sad, just familiar. "No, it was the new secretary." I tightened my grip on the teacup. "What did you do?" She leaned back in her chair, her eyes distant. I let him keep playing his game, but I started observing, remembering, setting little traps. Then she leaned forward and whispered, like she was sharing a secret recipe. "Let them play cards. You just have to mark the deck." That line struck me deeper than any advice could. I realized something. I didn't have to fight betrayal. I just had to expose it at the right time. Mrs. Celia opened a drawer and pulled out an old box. Inside was a small, vintage voice recorder that was still working. I used this to record my husband's phone calls with his colleague. Now you need it more than I do. I took it, no questions asked. It wasn't just an object, it was a gesture of solidarity, proof that I wasn't weak because of my age. I was strong because I'd seen enough to know what was real. Before I left, she said softly, Don't let them turn you into a hysterical woman. The calmer you are, the more they'll fear you. I nodded. From now on, they'll be the ones afraid. When I got home, I placed the recorder next to the USB, opened my notebook, and wrote, "I haven't lost my husband. I've just found the truth." I began to prepare as if stepping into a role. Every gesture, every line, every smile, carefully arranged like scenes in a precisely directed play. The woman Greg saw each night was no longer me. She was just a version gentle enough to avoid suspicion and quiet enough to let him keep making mistakes. I called Rachel, keeping my tone warm and friendly. "Could you come by next week to pick up some of Andrew's boxes? I won't be home. I have a conference in Boston." She answered smoothly, almost too quickly. "Of course, Mom. I'll stop by Thursday." Her voice was still sweet, still polite, but now I could hear the sharp edge beneath the sugar. Thursday came. I didn't leave the city. I rented a vacant apartment 1 floor below, right at the corner where I could see my own front door. I set up another small camera in the hallway, and I wasn't alone this time. Mrs. Celia, eyes sharp as steel, was ready. She called Rachel just as she entered the building, saying lightly, "You left your purse last time, dear. Come get it." Just bait, to make Rachel think everything was perfectly normal. 1:14 p.m., Rachel appeared, long coat, hair tied back neatly, holding the key I had returned to her a few days earlier, but I had already changed the locks. She used it to open the door, and I, watching through the camera feed, saw her walk in, still confident, still fearless. 20 minutes later, Rachel left the apartment, her expression calm. I went upstairs right after. The familiar scent of that perfume filled the room, a smell I now associated with betrayal. I opened the nightstand drawer. An envelope. Inside was an old photograph, over 10 years old, Rachel and Greg, standing side by side at an outdoor party. Greg's hand rested on Rachel's waist, far too familiar for a casual friendship. I remembered that party. Rachel wasn't even dating my son yet. On the back, in neat, deliberate handwriting, were the words, "We began before they knew, and will end after they understand." I placed the envelope back exactly as it was. I knew the game had changed. This wasn't just an affair, it was a long-planned scheme, from the very start, to take my husband, my family, my home. And if they had been playing this game for years, I would be the one to write its ending. I cooked dinner as usual, roast meat, mixed salad, red wine. Everything was just right enough not to raise suspicion, to make the liars believe I had moved on. Andrew arrived first, holding a small gift bag. Greg came after, carrying a vase of white lilies, the flowers I once loved before discovering they smelled exactly like Rachel's perfume. Rachel entered last, wearing a pale dress, soft pink lipstick, her hair lightly curled, as if she hadn't been sneaking into my apartment every Thursday. Dinner began. The conversation floated around work, the weather, and the upcoming vacation. I smiled at the right moments, nodded enough to keep things pleasant. Then, while pouring wine, I quietly placed a stack of printed photos on the table. Pictures from the camera. Rachel standing in my bedroom, opening my drawer. All three froze. Rachel was the first to speak, her voice still honey-sweet. "That must have been the day I stopped by to grab Andrew's things." I laid down the second photo. Rachel opened the envelope. Her face paled. Greg reached out, touching her shoulder, glaring at me. "What are you trying to do, Helen?" I smiled. "Just sharing a few family photos." Andrew looked around, confused. "Mom, what's going on?" I turned to him, my tone soft. "You know how much I love you, don't you? That's why I believe you deserve to know the truth." I pulled a printed copy of Greg's unsent email from my purse and placed it in front of Andrew. Greg shot up from his chair. "You went through my private emails?" I didn't answer. I just looked into his eyes, the eyes I'd trusted for over 2 decades, now colder than stone. Rachel whispered, "You said you'd handle it." Greg glared at her, his composure cracking for the first time. "I told you to stop." Andrew stood abruptly, pushing his chair back. "You two, how long has this been going on?" No one answered, only silence, thick, heavy, suffocating. I rose slowly, my voice calm. "Don't worry, Andrew. I've known for quite some time. It's just, tonight I decided everyone should know. We should start calling things by their real name, including betrayal." Greg looked at me, anger and helplessness warring in his eyes. Rachel stared down, twisting her napkin in trembling hands. I poured myself another glass of wine, lifted it to eye level, and said quietly, "Actually, I should thank you both. Because of you, I finally know how strong I am when I'm no longer being deceived." After that dinner, the house fell into an eerie kind of silence. Not peace, just the quiet that follows something breaking when no one bothers to fix it. Greg didn't come home that night. Rachel vanished from every family chat. Andrew, my son, sent a single text, "Mom." "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I didn't reply. I knew he needed time, just as I once did. The next morning, I went to the bank. I brought the account statements showing Greg's transfers to a consultant, who was, in truth, Rachel's cousin, and requested the complete separation of our joint accounts. I didn't take more than my share, but I took back control. I didn't need to fight for anything. I just needed to reclaim what was already mine. That afternoon, I sent the voice recordings, photos, and email copies to the HR department at Greg's company, where the code of conduct clearly prohibited personal relationships in the workplace. I also sent an anonymous packet to the ethics board at the university where Rachel taught. No threats, no anger, just the truth. A week later, Greg was asked to resign. HR called it a voluntary departure for personal reasons, but I knew better. Rachel was temporarily suspended. A student had received a copy of one of her personal emails, sent from her faculty address. She was placed under internal review. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel vengeance. Only fairness. Andrew came by a few days later. He sat on the sofa, his eyes full of conflict. "I don't know what to do, Mom. It feels like the whole family just collapsed." I sat beside him. "No, sweetheart, the family didn't collapse. It's just been cleared of the people who were never truly part of it." When Andrew left, I looked around the apartment. The same stage that had hosted so many acts of deceit. Now it was emptier, but in that emptiness I could see myself, clearly, alone, but no longer blind. I turned on some soft music and made tea. No cameras, no watching, no controlling anyone anymore. I had regained what they once stole from me, peace. I used to think starting over was a phrase for young people, but it turns out that sometimes women at 53 need it too, not to chase a new life, but to return to themselves after years of being consumed by the role of a wife. I changed the locks, told no one. The apartment now had only one resident and one person holding all the keys. I bought a few small plants, repainted the bookshelves, and moved the wedding photo to the bottom drawer. No burning, no tearing, just putting the past where it belonged. I found a women's center nearby, a place for those separated, widowed, or rebuilding after emotional wreckage. Initially, I had only intended to join a yoga class, but when I saw a flyer for volunteer creative writing instructors, I signed up. 3 weeks later, I stood in a small classroom before 8 women of all ages, their eyes carrying the same cracks as mine. I didn't tell my story, I just said, I used to think I was the weakest person in the room, but then I realized the weak never come to words for strength. Every Thursday afternoon, I still make tea at precisely 1 o'clock out of habit. But now, no one walks in with a spare key, no envelopes, no perfume, only me, the sunlight, and a soft jazz tune from the radio. Andrew started calling more often. Initially, the conversations were brief and hesitant. Then they turned into regular visits, bringing photos of his new cat, stories from work, and sometimes just comfortable silence. One day, he said, "Mom, you look healthier than before." I smiled. "Healthier doesn't mean unhurt, son. It just means I no longer have to pretend I'm okay for the one who hurt me." Mrs. Celia still knocks on my door sometimes, bringing cookies, small stories, and that knowing smile of hers. Once when I opened the door, she looked me up and down and nodded. "Looking at you now, someone's going to regret things." I answered softly. "Whether they regret it or just lose control, doesn't matter anymore. My new life isn't loud. No new love. No grand plans. Just a woman who has reclaimed her name, her quiet, and the peace she once traded for the wrong kind of love." One Tuesday afternoon, I happened to walk past the old cafe, the same place where Natalie once invited me to clear things up. Now the sign had changed. New owner. A notice taped to the glass door read, "Temporarily closed for renovation." I stood still for a few seconds. Then I walked away, not out of anger, not out of nostalgia, just because I no longer wanted to keep memories in places that once made me doubt myself. That evening, I sat by the window with my old notebook resting on my lap. The last page was still blank. I hadn't written for months, but this time I knew exactly what I wanted to say. Tuesday, 6:47 p.m. No strangers, no envelopes, no perfume, just me, and the quiet I once thought I'd never have again. I saw Luke again a few months later at the supermarket near my building. He was alone. No Natalie, no flowers. We looked at each other for a moment. He spoke first. "Helen, it's been a while." I nodded politely like someone greeting an old fellow passenger. "I heard about the court case," he said. I replied, "Yes. I cleaned out everything that didn't belong anymore." He was silent for a beat, then asked softly, "So, are you okay now?" I looked at him for a moment. Okay is a word for people still learning to endure. I've stopped learning that. I walked away first, back straight, without looking back. Life didn't change dramatically after that. I still lived in the same apartment, every crack now patched by my own hands, still taught writing each week, still grew new plants, still brewed tea at 1 o'clock sharp. But there was one big difference. I no longer flinched when someone knocked on the door. I no longer clutched my phone waiting for an explanation, and I no longer needed anyone to confirm I was worthy of a peaceful life. I didn't forgive. I didn't seek revenge. I simply put everything back where it belonged and closed the doors that no longer needed to be open. If you've ever lived in confusion, doubting your own feelings, I hope this story helps you understand one thing. You don't need betrayal to know you're strong, but sometimes it's the betrayers who make you discover that strength sooner. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life tales, where women aren't just storytellers, but the authors of their own destinies. Thank you for staying with me until the very last line. See you next Tuesday, when no one will use that day to hide anything ever again.